question twice. I'll try to make a call out to everyone that asked it, but make sure you listen closely throughout the tour because we're definitely going to try to get all those questions answered. All right, we are right at 10 a.m. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. We are so excited to have you at American Dairy Association Northeast virtual farm tour of Will-O-Crest Farms in Clifton Springs, New York. That's about 20 to 30 minutes outside of Rochester, New York, just to give everyone an idea of where we are. So pretty far upstate. We're so excited that you could all join us here today. As I mentioned before, if you're joining us via Zoom, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box. We will try our best to get those answered. If you are tuning in via Facebook Live, drop your questions in the comments box, and we will also try to get those questions as well. So before I introduce our host today, I want to show you a quick aerial shot of the farm we're going to be touring today. So this is Will-O-Crest Farms. You can see all those beautiful barns they have where they take care of their cows and keep them well housed and cared for. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to our host today, Hannah, who's actually out in the calf area. That's where we're going to kick off our tour.
All right, welcome everybody to the farm. I'm Hannah. This is Will-O-Crest Farm. We started farming back in 1976, and so I farm here along with my mom, my dad, my brother, and my husband. So lots of family here, and then we have a really great team of employees that help care for our animals too. So we're starting this tour out here with the calves because you always want to make sure you get to see the cute babies. These calves we have right here were just born earlier this week. So you can see this little girl here digging her nose down, and that's actually her straw. Everybody gets hay and straw confused, but she has nice straw in there. So when it's cold like it is today, she can snuggle down in there and stay warm. And then you can see she's wearing a coat too. So the weather just turned cool. So we started putting coats on our calves that are going to keep them warm through the winter. So care for our animals starts as soon as they're born. So the barn way far behind me is where the cows have their babies. They have their first baby when they're about 2 years old, and that's when they start making milk. And then when that calf is born, we're going to make sure the cow licks it off and cleans it off, which is kind of gross if you think about it, but that's the way cows do it. And then we want to make sure that calf gets colostrum, which is the cow's very first milk. And it's really rich in vitamins and minerals and what we call antibodies. So there's a lot of talk about health lately. So our calves, when they're born, they don't have any immunity, which means they don't have anything to protect them from disease. And they get the immunity from their mother's milk. So we want to make sure that we get that milk. So we're going to feed them 2 bottles of milk of that colostrum in the first half hour when they're born, and that really sets them up for success. So then they stay in that barn in that area for about 24 hours to make sure they're nice and fluffy and dry before they come out here to these individual hutches. So you guys, if you have been attending school in person, you've probably gotten pretty used to your space at your desk. That is your area, and other people don't come into it. And so we kind of do the same thing here with the hutches. So we've got calves in individual hutches, and this way they can't actually touch, and that way they can't get transmit any diseases between them if anybody gets a little cold or anything like that. And then these hutches, you can see inside, is nice, protected from the wind, and it's where they live for about the first 2 months of their life. And then we take care of them here, take care of all their needs. So in a little bit here, they are going to get their second meal of the day. They get 3 bottles of milk during the day. And then they always have fresh choice grain and water to eat as well. And so that's how we take care of our girls.
Awesome. We had a question come in about the ear tags from Rosanna. What are those for?
All right, excellent question, Rosanna. You can see they all have these ear tags, these numbers. So we have a lot of cows and we want to keep good track of them. So those ear tags lets us keep track of that animal. And we have a computer program that has all their information in there. So for this little cutie here, right now, we've got when she was born, who her mom is, who her dad is. We would have recorded how much she weighs when she was born. And then just like you guys have to get vaccinations to stay healthy, she will get vaccinations too. And so we'll make sure we record those in there. And if they ever get sick or need any treatment, then we're going to record that in there as well.
Awesome. We had another question from Amy. Why do they get separated from the cow?
Yep, that's a good question. So the reason we're going to separate them from the cow is that's how we can take the very best care of them. So cows are really big animals and the calves are really fragile, and the cows sometimes aren't quite careful enough. So they can step on the calf and break a leg and things like that. And like we talked about the immunity, we want to make sure the calves are in the cleanest environment possible. And sometimes, mom can be a little dirty. And so we separate them so we can take the best care of the calf, and then that gives the cow the chance to go eat, lay down, rest, and start focusing on making milk and being comfortable.
Awesome. A lot of really good questions coming in. We also had a question come in. How long do they stay in the hutches, from Brianna?
Yeah, so they stay in these hutches till they're about 2 months old. And then you might be able to see the barn behind us where they go afterwards. It's got a big curtain up, so it's kind of boring to look at right now. But they go over there and they start out in little groups of 10, and then they get into bigger groups. And then we move them to another place.
Awesome. We've had quite a few questions come in. I think 5 different students have asked, do the cows have any names?
Yes. So we do have some cows that have names. So some of our special cows, our kids love to show cows. And so they'll have some of their own cows that we have names for.
Awesome. Really great questions from everyone. We've had 2 questions come in, and one of those questions came from Garfield Park Academy. Have there been any changes on the farm, or particularly with calf care, since COVID began?
Yes. So things have been pretty much the same for the calves. And I think how people have been managed is a little bit more like our calves. Like I said, we've been separating them. We make sure they stay nice and healthy, and we give them vaccinations. So that care has all been the same.
Awesome. And then we've had a question come in from Amanda. How many calves do you have born yearly? Oh, that might be a tough number off the top of your head.
Yes, we should have about 1,800 calves born every year.
Awesome. And then from Bonnie, are all the cows on your farm female?
That is a really good question. So yes, we only have females here because only females make milk. And actually, something that's really cool is we breed our cows artificially. We don't have bulls here to breed them. And when we breed them artificially, we can actually breed for more females. So we can have more female calves born that are going to help produce milk for our farm.
Awesome. And then from Jackie, how long does it take before a cow is born? So I guess, what does the birthing or freshening process look like?
Yeah, so just like people, cows are pregnant for 9 months. And then we have somebody that walks through. We've got a group, we call it our dry cows or our pre-fresh pen, where those cows aren't being milked. They get a nice 60-day break to focus on their next calf. And so we have somebody walk through there every hour, every 45 minutes to look and see how all the expectant mothers are doing. And so they'll watch for signs like a cow pushing, and you can see some fluid and things like that. So then when we see that, we'll put the cow in a pen, and she's going to lay down and she's going to push. So she might be in the pen for an hour to 2 hours. Every cow's a little different. As they have more calves, it gets to be easier, but we just continue monitoring to them to make sure they're making progress. You get to see the feet come out and then the head. And so a couple hours.
Awesome. And then from Kristen, how many pounds should a cow be when it's born?
The calves can be anywhere from 60 pounds to 120 pounds. So this calf that you guys have been looking at here, she's pretty little. She's probably only about 70 pounds. There's not any real gigantic calves here right now, but you get some really big ones too.
Awesome. So we are getting
Actually,
a lot of really good questions about the milking process. So what we're going to actually do is show a quick video of how the cows are milked here at Will-O-Crest. And while we do that, Hannah's going to head to the cow barn. Unfortunately, we couldn't go live from the parlor because there's not very good service there. So we made this beautiful pre-recorded video. So make sure you listen closely because I'm sure many of your questions are going to be answered during this section.
All right, we are at our milking stop. So this is where all the action happens. This is our milking parlor. So the cows live out in the pen all day long and they only visit the milking parlor 3 times a day for about a total of 10 minutes each time. So we're gonna start the milking process. So you can see we've got our cows all lined up in here. And the first thing we do is what we call strip the cows. So I'm gonna get a little bit of milk out of each teat. And so what this does is I can check and make sure that all the milk is healthy looking and so it's nice and wholesome. And the other thing is too, is it signals to the cow that we're gonna start milking. So cows actually do what we call let their milk down. So this is creating some stimulation for her to know that we're milking. So she starts that process. So when we go through and we do every single cow. Right now I'm just gonna do this first cow. So that gives her some time as they do the other cows before we come back. I'm wearing gloves because we wanna make sure that we keep everything nice and clean. So your hands can have bacteria on them and gloves stay a lot cleaner. So that's what we're gonna use to milk our cows today. So now that she's been fore-stripped, we're gonna go through and we're gonna clean her teats. So this is a little brush that rotates. You can put your finger in there. It's nice and soft for the cow. And there's some liquid that squirts out too. And so it's gonna sanitize the cow. So we're gonna go through and we're gonna clean up each of her teats. And what we want is to make sure that the cow is nice and clean. So we go through once and wash them. And then we're gonna go through again and dry them. So the end of the teat, there's an opening for the cow, so there's the opportunity for bacteria to get in there. So we want to make sure things are really nice and clean for the cow and to make sure we've got that wholesome milk. So we'll go down the whole row with that as well. So we're going to give her a little bit of time right now to stimulate some more before we put the milking machine on. But you can see she's nice and clean now. The solution that was in the brush is actually it's to disinfect. And one of the things we think about here on the farm is the environment. And so the solution that's in there actually breaks down into salt and water. So that's one of the really cool things about the farm. Also with these brushes, this is a new technology that wasn't out 15 years ago. So dairy farming is really cool because we're constantly coming up with new ways to do things and different things. So not all farms are the same. We all have the same values and want to take care of our cows, but there's lots of different tools and things we can do to make that happen. So now it's time to milk our cow. And there's suction on here, so we're just going to put it on. So that's gently squeezing each teat, and you can see the milk coming along through here, through this hose, and that's going to go over into the milk room, which we'll look at next. So it only takes about 3 or 4 minutes for the cow to actually milk out. So there's a lot of the time is prepping the cow, and then she gets milked. And the milking machine is actually really smart. It knows how much milk is going through there. So when she's not making as much milk, the machine's gonna come off automatically. We don't wanna suck every drop out of her. We wanna leave a little bit in there and make sure it's a nice, comfortable experience. So cows actually really enjoy coming into the milking parlor. It's a nice, relaxing experience for them, and we do everything here to keep it that way and keep them nice and happy. So we talked about chewing our cud. And so if a cow's nice and relaxed, a lot of times you'll find cows in the parlor that are chewing their cud. They're nice and relaxed. So cows actually start making milk when they have their first calf. So just like humans would make milk after they have a baby. So cows will make different amount of milk. On average, a cow's gonna make 10 gallons of milk. but that changes kind of as time goes on. So when they first have the calf, they might be making 6 gallons. And then when that calf is 2-3 months old, if you think about nature, that's when the calf would be drinking the most milk. So the cows make a lot of milk then. We have some cows that have had 3 or 4 babies that are actually making 20 gallons in one day. And then our cows get pregnant, and then they start tapering off and milk a little bit less and less after that. And then we actually give them a break before their next calf. So 2 months before their next calf is born, that's what we call our dry cow period. So they're not going to get milk, they're going to get rested and prepared for their next calf. So our milking parlor is a double 12, which means we can fit 12 cows on each side. So we can have 24 cows milking at each time, and there'll be about 4 different groups of cows in here each hour. So that's how we're able to milk as many cows as we have on this farm. And they come in 3 times a day. There we go. All right, so now that the machine's come off, the cows all milked out. This girl actually had a lot of milk in her. I think she's right in that peak making a lot of milk. So she's probably making about 14 gallons right now. So what we're gonna do last, we talked about the teats have an opening and we don't want any bacteria to get in them. So since she just milked, they're a little bit more open than normal, and it's gonna take them a little while to close up. So we are gonna put this disinfectant lotion on them and cover them, and so that helps disinfect them. And then this has a lot of different things in it, like you would have lotion for your hands. So we wanna make sure the skin is really healthy and moisturized. So our cows get moisturized 3 times a day. All right, now that we've milked our cows, we're here in our milk room. So the milk travels through a stainless steel pipe into this room. So you can see there's a tank here behind me, and then there's a tank over here on this side. We actually have 2 tanks. So the milk truck comes every day to pick up the milk, and every time the milk tank is empty, it gets washed. So this tank over here is getting washed right now. We use super hot water and a special soap to rinse through and get everything washed so it's nice and clean. When the milk comes in, it comes in warm from the cow's body. So we're able to actually cool it down. This is a plate cooler, and so what happens is that it's got cold water running through it, and that cold water takes the heat out of the milk to cool the milk down. And from there, it's gonna go into our tank. And we want to make sure it gets cooled and that it's the proper temperature so we don't have any bacteria growth. So we have this little graph here. So you can see it's 37.4 degrees Fahrenheit for the milk right now. So it's nice and cool. And this has got an actual alarm on it. So if something happens, it's not cooling, an alarm's going to go off so we can fix the problem right away. Like I said, the milk truck comes every day to pick up the milk from this farm. So from here, the milk will go back to the processing plant where they're going to pasteurize it, which means heating it up to kill any bacteria that may be in it to make sure it's extra wholesome and healthy. And they're also going to make it nice and smooth, which is a process called homogenization. And then they'll package it and get it out to the grocery store or to your school in as little as 2 days from it leaving the cow. So for many of you students in New York or Northern PA, you might recognize the upstate milk. That milk, actually, our farm is one of the farms that contributes to that milk. So you might be drinking milk that's gone through these tanks for lunch today.
Awesome. So informative. So I hope many of you were listening because many of your questions were answered during that section. We did have a fun question come in, Hannah, that I'll have you answer. How do you know if a cow is pregnant?
That is an excellent question. And we are actually doing that right now in this pen. If you look at these cows, some of them have a V on their head. We actually have the vet here. The vet helps do us though. They have a V on their head. That means the vet needs to take a look at the cow. And the vet actually is able to reach into the cow and feel the cow's ovaries. And they can feel a little pregnancy there, a little calf growing follicle.
Awesome. So many of you have questions about where do the adult cows live? How much do they eat? What do they eat? Do they ever get to go outside? So this next section that Hannah's going to cover is going to answer all of those questions. So listen close and take it away, Hannah.
Yeah, so we're in the barn. This is where our adult cows live. So we're gonna start with their feed. If you guys look at the cows, you can see they're all very happily eating. They spend a lot of time eating every day, and what we feed them is very important. We want them to be very healthy, and that makes the best quality milk. So what they have in front of them is a total mixed ration, or a TMR. So it's a bunch of different ingredients mixed together. And on the table here, I have those different ingredients. So we have our haylage, which is hay that's chopped up and fermented. And we have our corn silage, which is corn that's chopped up and fermented. And that's a big bulk of what they eat. So within that, then we add some cornmeal, and we have some custom grain mixes with different minerals and proteins in it. We work with a nutritionist, and he goes and he looks at, all right, this is what our cows need. This is what we have for the nutrient quality in our forages, so what we need to put in there. So that's the majority of what the adult cows eat. We talked about that dry period. So when the cows aren't making milk, they don't need as much energy. And so in order to reduce the amount of energy in the ration, we actually end up putting some straw in there, because this is pretty much like celery. It doesn't really have any nutrition value, but it fills the cows up. So we put that in there. And then this here, we just have, this is some more of that calf grain that the calves eat. So all that gets put into a big mixer and mixed together. Another actual ingredient that we do put in there too is when people make Greek yogurt, they actually spin yogurt, and some fluid called whey comes out of it. And so we'll put some of that in there too. And that helps make the feed a little wetter and taste really good for the cows. So cows are really cool because they actually have 4 stomachs. So we wouldn't really eat this stuff, but the cows are able to, because they have those different stomachs. And you can see on this red cow here, you can probably see the collar that she's wearing. So that is a Fitbit for cows. So that tells us how much she walks around. So if she starts walking around less, we know, all right, maybe she's got a sore foot, maybe she's not feeling good. And the other thing they tell us is how much the cows eat. They have a little microphone in them that listens to the cow chewing. So we get a report, because when you start feeling sick, the first thing you do is you stop eating so much. And so we know, all right, we need to go take a look at this cow and see what's going on. You also might see on the head some other marks. There's this line down on this cow, and those are for us to let us know these cows need vaccination. So I've got a close-up of the collar here too that you guys can see. So it's got a little weight down here to make it hang right, and then this here is the electronic piece that records all the information and sends it over.
Awesome. We had a question.
Also here we have a really big barrel.
Oh, wow.
And this barrel shows about how much water a cow drinks. So the cows are going to drink a lot of water every day to make all that milk.
We had a question. How do you get this all done in one day?
That is a really good question. There's no way we could not do it unless we had a lot of great workers. So we have about 30 different people that work on the farm that help us do things. So there's always somebody milking cows. There's somebody who's dedicated to feeding the cows. We have the herdsmen who are dedicated to the health of the cows. So it's a very big team effort.
And we've had a couple questions about money and the finance behind a farm. You know, how much do you make in a day, and how much does it cost to take care of all these cows?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I don't necessarily have the answer to how much we make in a day. But it's smaller margins per cow. So it takes everything working together. We get paid about, depending on the pricing, we get paid anywhere between $12 and $15 for our milk. And it usually costs about $12 to make, that's 100 pounds of milk. So it depends on where the market is. Dairy farming is an industry where some years you make money, some years you don't. So you have to manage your finances. So you've got extra money from the good years to get through the bad years.
Awesome.
So we in the cow barn here now, so you can see what it looked like. So this is what we call a freestyle barn, because the cows are free to get up and roam wherever they want. So we've got all these great stalls here for them to lay in. And you can actually see a lot of the cows are chewing. It might look kind of weird because they're not up at the feed bunk. We talked about cows have 4 stomachs and they're a ruminant, which means they chew their food 2 times. So they come over here, and if they're chewing that cud, that means they're happy and they're relaxed. So they can chew that food again and help in that digestion process. So also in the barn here, we've got the alleyways that are nice and clean. We have a scraper that comes through here and continually scrapes and keeps it clean. And then the cows can get up and eat whenever they want to. We've got clean water for them to drink all the time. And then over on this other side, we have the wall to the outside, and you can see there's a little strip of curtain there. So that will come up and down depending on temperature. So it might be pretty cold for us in the barn today, but cows actually really like cold weather. So this is perfect. They are happy with it. But if it's raining or really windy, we'll put those curtains down. And in the summertime, our cows don't like heat. So we need to make it nice and cool in here. We do that with our fan. So when it hits 65 degrees, our fans automatically come on, and then they bring lots of cool, fresh air in here to cool down our cows. Those 4 stomachs they have, they actually generate a lot of heat. So all the cows are walking around with their own little personal heater in there.
Awesome. We had a unique question come in from Desiree. How can you tell if a cow has a twisted stomach?
So a twisted stomach is usually, we call it like a displaced abomasum. So there's 4 stomachs: the rumen, reticulum, omasum, and abomasum. And the abomasum sometimes it's disattached and floats up. And so how we're going to tell is we're going to look at the cow. We're going to rely on that information. Not, is she not eating? Then you look at the cow. Is she skinny? Did she lose too much weight, or her eyes sunken in? And then we can listen to her, and we can have the vet help listen to her and kind of listen to the sounds of her stomach, or with the displaced abdomen. There's actually this really interesting ping sound, like listening to a basketball. And it's actually kind of cool. How we fix that is that stomach belongs on the belly. So you actually roll the cow upside down, and then you can sew that down to the stomach where it belongs.
Awesome. We've had quite a few questions come in about the breeds of cows. Do you only have black and white cows, or the brown cows rare? What are the different breeds? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So black and white cows are Holstein cows. Most of them are black and white. You can see there is one red and white cow over here, and she's also a Holstein, but there's a few that are red. There's 6 major dairy breeds. There are a few Jerseys around here. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see the Jersey calf at the hutch or not, but those are the brown cows. So we have a few of those around here, and it's kind of cool. The cow breeds are a lot like dog breeds. They're all a little different. And you think of a cow's a cow, but they actually each have their own individual personality. So those brown cows love to play with their tongue, and they love to be a little bit more mischievous too. All the gates around here, we have a chain on them because there's a chain and a latch, and some cows are really good and they can get that latch open with their tongue. So they like to get into trouble.
We had a question: is cow's milk nutritious for you?
That is an excellent question. So yes, cow's milk is very nutritious for you. So it has 9 essential nutrients, and it actually has 3 of the 4 nutrients that kids aren't getting enough of these days. So it's really good in calcium, phosphorus. It has a lot of protein in it as well too. And that's one thing that depending on, some people might not like the taste of milk, so they go to a milk substitute, like a nut milk, and a lot of those don't have the protein that a cow's milk does. And then you know, we use the milk to make things like cheese and yogurt and ice cream. So there's a lot of delicious ways to get your calcium and your nutrients in from milk.
Awesome. We had a question come in from Regina. How many vaccinations do your cows get?
So our calves usually get about 6 or 7 different vaccinations before they have their first calf. And then throughout the lactation, which is the time period a cow is milking. If you look out here, I don't know if it's hard to hear me or not, but you can see this is our feed truck coming by with food for the cows. But during the lactation, the cows usually get about 5 more vaccinations as well too. And some of those are for the cow's health, and some of those are actually to help make that colostrum richer and help protect her calf.
Awesome. We did have a couple questions about health and wellness. So how can you tell if a cow or a calf is sick?
Yep. So a lot of it comes down to looking at their eyes and kind of their general demeanor. So when you're sick, you don't feel good, you kind of hang your head, you don't eat. So, these cows are all happy and eating. So this cow here, she actually might not be feeling as good. If you can see, her eyes aren't quite as bright and she's a little bit skinnier. So she might be a cow that we're looking at right now, or, just got better from something. So those are some of the things that you look at. And those are things that we work with our team and things you learn as a dairy farmer to look for.
Awesome. And we had a question come in. Do the cows get annoyed when they're being milked, or do they like the milking process?
Cows like to be milked. So, like I said, cows have different personalities. The cows know when it's milking time, and there will be cows waiting up at the gate ready to run to the parlor to get milk. So it's a nice relaxing process for them. Another thing I want to talk about in the barn that I didn't cover is what the cows are laying on. So this is actually sand, and it's recycled sand. So it's nice and comfortable for the cows. It's like laying on the beach. You think about how nice it is on the beach and how that conforms to your body, because the cows are very big. And then it's nice, and it also doesn't hold bacteria very well too. So it's very good and clean. And then you can actually see here, this is the alley scraper. It's going backwards. It's going to go backwards on one side and forwards the other side, but these wings will open up and they'll push the manure to the other end. And you can see the cows kick some sand out of the stalls. So they're going to push it to the other end, and then we actually run water through the manure so we can separate out that sand and dry it and wash it and use it again. And then the liquid manure we're going to put on our fields because it has a lot of really great nutrients in it that we're going to use to help grow the crops for the cows.
Awesome. We have a couple of questions about what are the red marks on their backs?
Yes. So she has a T right here. So our cows get to go to get pedicures. So that T, this morning they would have gone through and they marked cows. So when the foot trimmer comes, he's going to come and look at this cow, and we're going to pick up all her feet and make sure she's nice and healthy and trim them off. So that's one of the things we do to keep our cows healthy. We usually trim their feet about 3 times a year.
Awesome. And then we had a question from Nicole. Are they wild, or are they comfortable with you?
So yes, cows have been domesticated by people for quite a while. So you can see nobody really cares. I grabbed some sand and she stood up, but they're all really relaxed. So they're used to people, and we make sure that we're always really nice and kind to our cows so that we have that great relationship.
Awesome. And how many cows total do you have on your farm?
Yes. So we milk about 1,800 cows here on the farm. So we actually have 2 places that we're milking. But then in addition to that, we have all the calves. So we would have about another 1,400 calves. So all together, we're over 3,000 animals.
Awesome. We had a question about their tongues. How long are they? But can you tell us a little bit how they feel too?
So, well, they can usually put them out about 6 inches. And yes, they feel like sandpaper. So what their tongues do is they are designed to wrap around in grass and pull it in. So the sandpaper does that. And then another cool thing about the cows is, if you can see on this one chewing or not, she's got teeth on the bottom, but no teeth on the top. They've just got a really hard palate up there.
Awesome. And we did have a question. Do you only have dairy cows on the farm?
Yes, primarily we only have dairy cows. One thing that we're actually doing is because we can control how many females we get, we actually breed some of the cows to beef. And so we do have some beef calves that are then sold into beef operations and raised up and cared for the beef farmers.
Awesome. And then we did have a question about the younger calves. What milk do they receive? Is it milk from a cow or is it something else?
Yeah, so we actually take milk from our cows to feed it to our calves. There's a couple different ways you can do a milk replacer, but we have a pen, our hospital pen, where some of the cows that aren't feeling as good are in there, or the cows might have had a treatment. And so we take that milk and we feed that to our calves. Usually there's not enough sick cows to feed all the calves, so we end up taking more just from that giant bulk tank that we saw where we store the milk to feed the calves. And then we pasteurize it before we give it to them.
Awesome. We had a fun question from Elizabeth. Do you have to have a license to farm?
You might have a better answer than me on this one. I think you have to be registered, but not necessarily licensed. But the government does come and we have milk inspections. So they look at the milking equipment, and the farm program, they come out, they walk through the cows, they make sure everybody's healthy, everyone's well cared for. So there are different things that are being looked at to make sure we're doing a good job and taking good care of our cows.
Yeah, farms like Hannah's, because they're selling a food product for all of us to enjoy. Like she said, they are licensed to be able to do that and inspected to do that. And then also, she mentioned manure management. They are regulated on how they manage that fertilizer, that manure that they put out on their fields too. So in a way, you actually have to have, I guess, a couple different license, if you want to call it that. But farmers work very closely with a lot of groups to make sure they're doing their job to the best of their abilities. We did have a question. How many calves do you have on the farm right now?
So the little calves on milk, we've got about 150 of those right now. And then animals that are too young to be milking, there's about 1,400.
Awesome. And then how much does a full-grown cow weigh?
So cows weigh about 14 to 1,800 pounds. So this girl here is pretty big. She's probably 1,650 pounds. You can tell from her number, she's 180. A lot of people ask how old cows are, how long cows live. So this cow here, from that number, she's probably about 5 years old. She's probably had 3 calves. Our oldest cow here is actually 12 years old. She's about to calve in with, I think it is her 11th calf that she's going to be having.
Awesome.
And then, yeah, so 11,878 is probably, she's 3 years old.
Awesome. And we also had a question, how tall and how heavy do your cows get?
Ooh. So I am 5'4". So this girl has got to be almost 5 feet tall. So we have had some that have weighed a ton, 2,000 pounds. Especially if a cow's not making a lot of milk, she puts on a lot of fat. That'll add some weight on there. So we do have some bigger ones. This girl here is more of a moderate sized cow.
Awesome. And then we are in the Freestyle Barn. We've had a couple questions like, do they ever get to go outside in the field? And if not, why not?
Yep. So our cows here stay in the barn. They're going to walk to the parlor, and there's a little alley walkway outside that they're going to walk into the barn. But the reason we keep them in here is that it's the most comfortable spot we have for them. In the summer, when it's really hot, and sunny outside, it's too hot. They'd rather be in the barn here. They'd rather be in with these fans. And it's also the easiest way for us to make sure we're properly managing the manure, that the manure is getting recycled and used and where it's supposed to go.
Awesome. We had a couple questions. You mentioned that the cows on this farm are all female. How are the males utilized, and do you have any on the farm?
Yep. So we don't have any on the farm, other than some really little ones. Usually when they're about 3 days old, we sell those males and they're going to go to a beef farmer. So they're going to get raised to about 2 years of age by a beef farmer who, just like dairy farmers, cares for their animals, is going to give them vaccinations and care for them and feed them really well.
And then we had a question from Jessica. How did you get into the dairy business?
So I was born here on this farm. So I always knew I wanted to do something to do with cows. I really love cows. They're really cool creatures, and if I don't get to be with them enough, I miss them. But other people have entered the dairy industry too. So if you're interested in it, the really good thing to do is to reach out to some local farms and ask about working. And also, I did 4-H as well too. So I got to show cows, and my daughters now love to show, and that's a really fun activity and way to get involved. There's a lot of different jobs in dairy farming. So there's working with the cows, but like I talked about, we have that nutritionist or that veterinarian, or we even have the people that design our barns, and the people that are taking the milk and making it into cheese and yogurt. And so there's so many different ways that you can be involved, and a lot more of those technology jobs too.
Yeah. And we did actually have a question. How old do you have to be to work on a farm? And 14, because that's when you can legally start working. So that's the answer to that one. But Crystal asked, how many hours do cows sleep every night? But I think she'd also be curious to know about their resting patterns.
Yes, that is an excellent question. So our cows spend between 12 and 14 hours every day laying down and resting. So they're not necessarily sleeping. They're only going to sleep for like 30 minutes here and there. So they might sleep about 4 hours, but they really just like to lay down and relax. And so cows are traditionally a prey animal. So if you think about out in the wild, they don't really have much of any way to defend themselves. And that's kind of part of the way that they eat the way they do. They typically eat in the wild at dusk and at dawn. And that's when, there's not a lot of predators out. And then during the day, they're going to go lay down, and that gives them the time to ruminate and chew their food again. And they'll lay down some at night too. So they're not like us where they don't necessarily sleep during the night and during the day. They're more like cat nappers.
Awesome. From Damien, he said his guinea pigs eat Timothy hay. What type of hay do you feed your cows?
So we have a lot of alfalfa. We looked at that haylage. And so instead of having dry hay, we tend to put it together and ferment it because it's a lot easier for us to store, especially here in New York where the weather isn't always predictable. It's much easier to chop it up and ferment it rather than the hay, but primarily alfalfa.
Awesome. And then from Levi, what's the average body temperature for a cow?
Ooh, I cannot remember exactly, but I do know it is a little bit higher than people. I think it's a little bit closer to, I think it's usually like 101 degrees for a cow.
Yeah, usually like to Hannah's point, she talked about the different sizes of the breed, so that'll impact it. Right around 100 to 101 is a good temperature, so a little higher than us. And then we had a question from Chase. Do the cows ever escape? Which I think you mentioned.
Yes, the cows do sometimes escape. And actually, if we come over here, we can find one of our escapees from the other day. This big red cow here on the end. We were doing a commercial for this tour, and the gate was open and she just walked right through. So sometimes they will open the gates, or sometimes they'll just run out, but she went out, she ran around, and then she was ready to come back in and be with her herd mates.
Awesome. We've had a lot of questions on how long do cows live? What's their average lifespan?
Yep. So they usually live to be about 6 to 7 years old. It depends a little bit for each cow.
Awesome. So we are right at 10:45. So for those of you who do have to jump off at 10:45, thank you so much for joining us today. A recording of this tour will be available on YouTube and on Facebook Live as well, both at American Dairy Association Northeast.com. We also, as you leave the tour, if you're tuning in via Zoom, you will have a survey link up in your web browser. Please fill that out. We want to know your opinions on how we can better enhance this learning experience for everyone. But if you have a few extra minutes, Hannah is going to join us till 11 o'clock today to continue answering these really great questions that we have. So if you have a little more time, we're going to spend 15 more minutes doing that. So with that,
Yeah.
do you, we had a couple questions. Oh, this one's good. And maybe you'll be able to answer this from Jessica. How far do cows walk in a day?
My husband has it all calculated out. But not much. Our cows might walk about half a mile to a mile by the time they go to the parlor and back 3 times a day. So it's some good exercise for them. And actually, we think about that. We have, our older cows that, it's older people walk a little bit slower and sometimes have, a sore knee or something like that. So those cows are right next to the parlor, so they don't have to walk near as far. And then the younger cows are the ones that walk further away and get to walk more.
We had a couple questions about herding. 1, do you have any herding dogs? And 2, do you have to herd the cows to get them to go where you want?
We have not had herding dogs before. Since we have the cows in the barn, it's pretty easy to just walk and get them to go. There's not a big area. If you're out in a big field, then it really is helpful to have a dog to round them up. So I guess if the cows get out, that would be the time we would need them. But right now, you end up moving them, and usually the guys will whistle a little bit to let the cows know that they're there. And like I said, they know it's time to go to the parlor, so they'll all get up and walk that way.
Awesome. And then we had a question on the manure scrapers. How many of those gutters do you have in the barn?
So the typical setup for each of our pens is there's a front alley and a back alley. And the front alley is where we have the feed, and then we've got these beds. So in each barn, there'd be 4 alleys like that. And we have basically 2 barns. So I guess we kind of got 4 alleys or 8 alleys across.
Yeah, that's why the automated alley scrapers come in handy to keep those cows nice and clean. So many great questions coming in. We've had a couple questions about twins, and are twins common among cows? And if so, do those twins stay together?
Yeah, so twins are kind of common, about the same as people. So we usually get maybe 3 or 4 or maybe even 6 sets of twins a month. And cows are kind of cool because sometimes they do stay together. So you can see the different numbers. And so you can walk out through the barn and look at 2 cows laying next to each other with those numbers right the same, that, they've stayed buddies this whole time.
Awesome. Fun question from Aiden. Do you ever bathe the cows?
So our normal cows don't usually get baths, but when we bring them to the fair, we do give them baths, and they actually like it. They're pretty good. It's like washing a car.
Yeah, so in a normal year, Hannah's family does take their cows to cow shows like the New York State Fair, and local county fairs. So for those of you who are local to upstate New York, maybe you'll get to meet their cows in person someday. So another question we have, oops, my chat moved a little too quickly for me. Do you ever have to help deliver the calves when the cow's freshening?
Yes. Yep. About 15% of the time we'll help deliver. So what that looks like sometimes is just gently pulling on the legs as the cow pushes, just to get a little extra there. And sometimes they're having a really hard time and we have to have the vet come. So that's why we keep that really close eye on the cows. so we know when we need to help or when they can do it on their own.
Awesome. And then from Kristen, do cows have good eyesight?
Eyesight, it is pretty decent. One of the really cool things about cows is their eyes are on the side of their head, so they can see pretty far around. They can see like all the way from here to here. So directly behind them is kind of the only spot they can't see. They're not really good at seeing color though.
Awesome. And then how big is your farm from Stella? So maybe how many acres?
So we farm about 3,500 acres.
And then from Gabriella, do cows ever bite?
Yes, I have been bitten by a cow. I'm actually smiling now because the cameraman keeps getting licked by some cows. And usually they're just having fun and licking, and they'll try and grab a piece of your clothing just kind of to eat it, but they're not biting to be mean. They're just playing around.
And then from Arvine Elementary, do all cows have the same pattern of spots?
So every cow actually has her own unique pattern. So that is a lot of different patterns there, but they're typically going to come in. We've got our white, we've got our mixed, and then we've got, the black cow over here. But
awesome. A lot of questions about the life expectancy of a cow. On average, how long does a cow live?
On average, it's 6 to 7 years.
Awesome. And we had a question. Do you have any beef cows on the farm?
We don't have any beef cows on the farm.
And then from Mary Ann, how long does it take for a cow to be able to start giving milk?
That's a really good question. So our cows start giving milk when they have their first calf, and they have their first calf or baby at 2 years old. And then after that, about every year they have a calf, because the cow's only going to give milk for so long after she has her calf. And typically that's 10 to 12 months. Then she gets those 60 days off and then has her next calf and starts milking again.
Awesome. And you mentioned the calves and the hutches stay there for about 2 months. After that 2-month time period, where do they head to? And that's from Andreas.
Yeah, so we have the calf barn. They'll be in the calf barn for about 4 months. And then we actually have another site that's got pens set up like this cow pen here, just smaller versions. And they're going to be over there for a year. When they're about a year old is when we breed them. And then I don't know if you guys can see it all now, but over in the distance here, these are some of the pregnant heifers back there. So they're going to have a calf in about the next 4 months and then join the cows.
Gotcha. And then from Emily, how long does it take for a cow to be full grown?
So it takes about 3 years for a cow to be full grown. When they come in with their first calf at 2, they still have some growing to do. But by 3 years, they've pretty well been done growing. All the cows here in this pen are fully grown cows. We tend to group our cows by age a little bit. So we have pens where it's cows that are all on their first lactation. These are the older cows. Across the way, those are cows that just had their calf in the last 30 days. They're all in the pen together to give them lots of extra space and get going before they're join the other cows for the lactation. Awesome.
Are cows good with other animals?
Cows are pretty good with other animals. Yeah. They always like to look at the dogs, and there's cats wandering around, and you can usually find them licking cats too. The cats, are like, "Oh, I'm getting petted," but they usually look pretty slimy to me afterwards. But the cows enjoy interacting with animals.
From Mary Raber Elementary, they'd like to know more about how your farm was started.
So both of my parents come from dairy farms. And they both went to college, met in college. And so when my father graduated, he was looking for a place to buy. So he found this farm, and he bought it for the person who was milking before. And we bought it, there was only about 100 cows here. So he brought about 30 cows from home. My mother brought about 15 cows from her home. And then over the years, through really good management, they've been able to add cow numbers. They've bought some cows. They've done some partnerships with other people to get to be the size it is now. And then as their children, myself and my two brothers have gotten older, we've become part of the farm and part of the ownership and management here. And then, the goal is for the grandchildren to be the next to take over the farm.
Awesome. And we had a question from Tess. What's the largest calf you've ever had born on the farm that you can remember?
Ooh, we've probably had some that are maybe 180 pounds. A couple of the ones that I remember though is triplets. We had a set of bull triplets quite a few years ago, and I was the one delivering there. So it's always after we have one calf born on the ground, especially if they're small, you want to check the cow, make sure there's not another one. Got another one out, and it's like, well, let's just check for a third one. And there was a third one there. And then actually about a year ago, we had triplet heifers as well too. And actually those triplet heifers, usually like triplet calves will only be like 60 pounds, and these calves were all 80 pounds. So that was one full mama.
Awesome. And from Stephanie, is there a certain time frame when cows have calves each year, or do you freshen whenever?
So we've got a mischief maker over here stealing a mask. But the cows in the wild, usually they would freshen more in the spring. And so that's when they would have, more grass to eat during the summer. But since we're in the barn and we got feed for them all year round, they freshen in all year round. So we're always breeding cows, always having babies being born.
Awesome. We had a couple questions. Does any of your milk go into ice cream making?
So a little bit of our milk does. So the way milk is sold usually is farms are part of a cooperative. There's someone they partner with that's really good at taking the milk, and they're going to process it. And they're the ones that are going to turn it into other products. So we're part of Upstate Farms. So you probably, if you're in New York State, you've probably seen the Upstate little pint containers. If you're in New York City, that's where they all go. But then Upstate also makes some yogurt, and they make some string cheese, and then they do have some ice cream mix, usually a soft serve ice cream.
Awesome. And then from Sharon, how long are the cows in the milking station or milking parlor?
It's an excellent question. They're in there for about 10 minutes from when they get in, get prepped, finish, and then leave. So there's always new cows in that area.
Awesome. So with that, I'm going to ask one last question from Mrs. Victor's class in Austin, Texas. Do you have any examples of conservation on your farm? And I know you've talked about a couple of them, but I think this is a good question.
Yes. So some of the things we do, one is we are really good at recycling. So we recycle those nutrients. Some of the other conservation things we do are focused more around the crops. So you can see she's trying to bite me right now. So we plant cover crops so that the land isn't bare over the winter, and that keeps the soil together. We also it used to be you plow your fields and turn over the soil, and now you can actually just make a little strip and plant in there. And again, that helps keep all the soil together. So a lot of the things we do are with the field that way.
Awesome. And I'm actually going to ask one more question. From the Nativity of Our Lord School, if a cow gets sick, does that affect the milk we drink? I think this is an important question because milk is very safe.
Yes. Yep. So if a cow gets sick, it depends. If she has like a respiratory illness, it's not going to affect the milk at all. But if she ever has something and she needs an antibiotic, we put her in that hospital pen, and that's where that milk is not going to go to the grocery store. And then, so sometimes they can have a little bit of an infection in their udder. We call that mastitis. So those cows are going to go there too. because their milk quality isn't quite as high. They might be over there. They might not actually be on an antibiotic, but because the quality of their milk isn't what we want it to be, we're not going to feed that to you guys. And so right now today, I said we've got 1,800 cows here. We probably have about 15 cows in the hospital pen, and probably about 5 of those are actually getting antibiotics. So not very many of the cows.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We are right at 11 o'clock. You had wonderful questions, and let's give Hannah a round of applause from our classroom. She did an awesome job answering those questions. If you have other questions, feel free to reach out to Hannah on the Will-O-Crest Farm's Facebook page. She'd be more than happy to answer those for you, or reach out to us at American Dairy Association Northeast. We can answer those questions for you as well. And the recording for this tour will be available on Facebook and YouTube, and I'll email a link to anybody that registered for the tour. And be sure to fill out that survey in your web browser after the fact. So with that, any last words for our guests today, Hannah?
Well, just thank you for joining in. I am really glad I got to share our life with you. Farming is a passion and it's a lot of fun, and I'm really glad that you guys got to see what goes behind the scene. And I hope you guys realize how much we care for our animals and how much we enjoy creating a healthy, nutritious product for you guys to eat. So as Emma said, feel free to reach out if you come up with more questions. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.